So this is such an important part of Kingsport from the beginnings, and Lenita's going to tell us some more about it. Thank you. And I'm with you.
Thank you all for coming. I'm going to start with reading just a brief story, and it'll be obvious why in a bit. A few said the house was cursed. Many more knew it was haunted. Cursed because the two previous owners had died shortly after buying it. Haunted because, well, there the stories are myriad. The young girl must have been born loving big old houses, as she could never remember a time that she didn't. She certainly had never lived in one, coming from a loving but poor family. There had been a big, beautiful old house on the other side of the little country town in the south where she grew up, and she often played there with her friends. It had wonderful, huge rooms with high ceilings and a magnificent central grand staircase that halfway up divided to the left and to the right. Stained glass in the window at the landing beamed a kaleidoscope of colors which changed hourly as the sun moved across the sky. Rooms and cubbyholes were everywhere, making her feel as though she was playing in a giant old roll-top desk with nooks and crannies and secret hiding places everywhere. And on vacations, the young girl and her family often visited historic places. She reveled in the old homes and dreamed of someday maybe living in one herself. As she grew older, the dream never faded, yet it never seemed to come closer either. She discovered that one of her brothers shared her dream, and they used to talk of maybe someday, sometime, sharing in the restoration of one of those magnificent old houses. She even cross-stitched a picture of one and gave it to her brother, the dream never fading for either of them. Yet still it all remained just a dream, a fantasy, a ghost, a mirage, forever beyond her grasp. The years went by, the young girl became an adult. The dream of the old house was still just a dream, but she was living another dream now. She was a practicing physician, having finally answered a call she had always felt, but long fought. When the time drew to settle down, the girl was living and working in Alaska. She longed to return to the south, but to put down roots in the familiar soil that had nurtured her, the place that also nurtured so many wonderful old homes. On a job interview trip to the town that would become her home, she saw the house, and it was love at first sight. The house was grand, yet sad, elegant and refined beneath the tatters and neglect. It needed to be taken care of so that it in turn could take care of its inhabitants. It could not survive by itself, despite its having endured so long. Many feared it would be lost very soon thereafter. The girl had always loved houses like this one, returned to Alaska, wondering if maybe her childhood dream was within her grasp. The real estate brochure about the house asked the somewhat corny question, who will clothe the grand lady and escort her into the 21st century? Across the miles, the girl heard the house say, "You are the one." She felt a pull, a connection, a link, all the while hearing, "You are the one." She had been told the house was haunted, but how could it not be? Who could possibly fathom all that had happened there? The many and varied lives that had left their mark and taken in return. The births, the deaths, the loves, the hates, the joys, the sorrows, the tears, the laughter, the sounds, the silences, the secrets. But it is not a mere relic of a long ago age that was, as is all of life, both good and bad. The house is a tangible link with the past, through the present, and into the future. The house was born in the early 1800s, it lived throughout the 1900s, and it continues into the 2000s. How much longer it stays depends on all those who dreamed the dream of the young girl. The brother who shared her dream helped her move to town. They explored the old house and spent time just looking at it. He smiled and his eyes twinkled when he punched her shoulder and said, "Good job, sis." He died unexpectedly a few months later. But his portion of the dream lived on in her, and she felt his essence added to the others who had loved the house. Though the brother can no longer share the dream, she knows the house itself will continue as long as someone dreams, as long as someone hears. The girl is but one in what is hoped to be a long line of caretakers. The house had spoken to others. It spoke to the girl. Will it continue to speak? A dream? Haunted? Indeed. I am the girl, the house is Rotherwood. I actually wrote this at the turn of the century for the Times News. I had a supplement or something about past, present, and future, and that was my submission. So So that gives you some idea of where things, or where my mindset was with this. Just got a few notes here so I can forget. A lot of people ask, well, how'd you get to Kingsport? How'd you know about the place? This was 26 years ago, no Google thing. So how'd you find out about it? And as Gail alluded, I was military, paid my way through medical school, and then owned my soul for a few years, and my last duty station was in Alaska. And when I knew I was going to be getting out of the military, I contacted basically a headhunter agency that did placements for physicians, just to kind of see what was available. I wasn't exactly sure when I was getting out, because that was at the time of Desert Storm and Desert Shield. But I was coming home on a trip at Thanksgiving in 1990, and the headhunter agency had these other places and sort of lined up that I was going to go to. And I knew I wanted to be preferably in the south, southeast, east, lower east, not New England, because I am southern. And I actually thought I wanted to be in a bigger city, Nashville, Atlanta. I did look at actually a place near Williamsburg because of the historic everything's there. And so I was looking more, because I like symphony and opera and all that type of stuff. And sort of at the last minute, the headhunter agency called me in Alaska and woke me up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, because they were 4 hours later, 5 hours later. And I'm not a morning person, so that's not a good time to contact me. But they called me and they said, oh, we got this great opportunity in Kingsport, Tennessee. We really want you to go. And my initial thought was, Kingsport? We want to go to Kingsport. I sort of knew where it was, because having lived and grown up in Little Rock, Arkansas, I did go to graduate work at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, lived in Frederick, Maryland, so trips home, Bristol particularly, I knew it fairly well. But anyway, it was kind of like, it's kind of a small town, I'm not sure, but I thought, well, it's a free trip, who cares, I'll go and at least can talk to them. And when I got here, I was very impressed with Kingsport in general, with the hospitals, with the medical facilities, with everything that goes on here. And it was kind of like, it's a pretty nice little town. The first night that I was here with the people that brought me here, we were at Scobie's. A lot of you remember Scobie's. One of the little rooms there that's so nice. I wish someone would bring that back. But anyway, I digress. We were talking about things that we liked, and the physician who brought me here was a lover of books, and particularly real old ones and antique ones. And we were talking, and I said, oh, my dream house would be a great big old plantation type of mansion with a big library. And they said, oh, well, you need to see Rotherwood. And I said, okay, what's Rotherwood? And so they told me about it, and it was listed in brochures and that type of thing. And the next morning, the real estate agent took me on tour. It's standard to take you on a tour of the city, kind of see where things are. Well, this was not her listing, but they told her that I might be interested in Rotherwood. So we had gone out to Allendale, down Stone Drive, Allendale, and then went back in the Rotherwood Estates area. And then we were driving down Netherland Inn Road toward Kingsport. And as we were driving by, the real estate agent said, oh, and there's Rotherwood. So it was like, yeah. And it's like, ooh, that's really nice. Finished my tours, went back to Alaska. Not long after I got back to Alaska, the headhunter agency called me and they said, they really, really, really like you in Kingsport. What do you think about them? And I said, well, I was impressed, but I'm still not sure about a small town. And they said, what would it take for you to say yes? And I said, well, there's this little house there. And of course, the headhunter agency had no idea what it was. I told them, I had no idea. I'd never bought a house before. I'd never had no idea what was, how much I could buy, anything like that. I was very naive about all those types of things. And the headhunter agency, or the guy said, okay, I'll get back with you, let me know. A few days later, he called back and he said, okay, they're going to increase your starting salary so you don't have any problems qualifying for the mortgage. They're going to give you a signing bonus, which you're to turn around and give us earnest money. But they kept naming all this stuff, and it was like, okay, I'm yours. And I called the other places and told them I was coming here. And if you think about that story, all I had seen was like that 10 seconds drive by. I had not seen the inside of the house. I had not seen anything. So, yeah, I got a lot of reactions. It's like, you're doing what? And I knew that it was structurally sound, that other people had looked at it. The guest house had been redone, so I knew that I would have a place to live. And the office manager actually called me and she said, "Do you really know what you're doing?" Probably not, but I also told her it didn't matter. I didn't care what shape the house was in. I knew it needed work, and I said, if it takes me the rest of my life, that's okay. It was my dream. So that's how I got here. Yes, the house did speak to me. I admit I was somewhat nervous and had a lot of fear and trepidation when I first came here, knowing that this house was so important to this community, and how Kingsport would accept this outsider coming in and buying their mansion. Because some places they're very closed about things like that. If you're not part of the old family, you don't fit in, and I wasn't sure. But I moved here, and not long after I first moved here, and I was living in a motel, and I'll get to that here in a second, but there was in the newspaper and advertised, there was Mimi Spoden was having a book signing of her, I think it was Kingsport, the early years, that came out in '91, and she was at the Netherland Inn, or was going to be at the Netherland Inn. And I thought, oh, that would be interesting to go and see and get her book and find out more about Kingsport and see the Netherland Inn. So I went and kind of waited at the end of the line and got up to the table where she was, and I got there and I introduced myself and I said, I'm the one that's buying Rotherwood. She shrieked, she jumped up, and she ran around the table and hugged me, gave me this huge bear hug, said, Hal, come here, come here. Was in tears. She said, oh, we are so glad you're here and you're buying this house. We were so afraid that it's just going to collapse if somebody didn't do it. So I decided, okay, this was meant to be. But that was my first big exposure to the hospitality and the warmth of Kingsport people. As I mentioned, I lived in a motel for 3 months or about almost 3 months, 2 months, because there had apparently never been a mortgage on this house before. Everybody else, I guess, had more money than I did at that point or whatever. So there were some estate issues with the previous owner having died and his significant other having to work out some of the estate problems. And the bank basically viewed the house as worthless. And what I mean by that is that it had no value from a banking mortgage standpoint. The roof was leaking, there was damage being done inside, mainly because of the roof. And since it was not livable, it was not deemed having any worth. The purchase price of the property, and I guess it doesn't hurt to say it's a public record, is mainly from the land. This sits on just over 7 acres. I paid $325,000 for this. Wow. About $60,000 was with the guest house and the garage. Those were the only buildings that had any value. So, but there was no listed. It was like there's a building on the property, but it had no value initially. So, the roof was leaking, and one of the conditions of the mortgage was that I had to replace the roof. And in fact, the bank wanted me to replace the roof before giving me the mortgage, and it was like, no. But we had to have everything ready. And in fact, I closed on it was like a Thursday or Friday, and the next Monday the roofers were here, starting with that, because that was necessary to stabilize the house. It was particularly this portion of the house had a lot of water damage, and there were. In the bathroom there, they had a drop ceiling that was half taken out, and there were actually mushrooms growing into the bathroom in the ceiling there, which was interesting. I don't think Gail mentioned this, the house was actually built in 3 parts. The oldest part of the house is the third over there, that's the dining room primarily, and that was the part that was built about 1818. Probably was built as lodging for F.A. Ross and his artisans, architects, who built the original Rotherwood mansion, which was across the street. Fred McConnell's house used to be there. That's gone now, but it was at the top of the hill across Netherland Road. There was this house, this third of the house was a separate parallel house that was built about 1820. In fact, one reason the walls are so thick, this used to be an outside brick wall. And then they were joined, so you had two separate buildings there, and they were joined about 1845. And that's when they were joined as a wedding present for F.A. Ross's daughter, Rowena, only daughter and oldest child, as a wedding present. And then that's the story that actually it happened that her fiancé drowned in the river the day before the wedding. So she actually never lived here, because a young unmarried woman would not live in a house by herself. She would have still been living over. So that kind of debunks some of the ghost stories that some people talk about, because she never lived here. She actually did have a somewhat tragic life. She married someone in Chattanooga. He died of yellow fever. She married again and did commit suicide, but she was in Huntsville, Alabama when she committed suicide. And just an aside, some of the people who tout these ghost stories and don't have their facts straight do drive me a little crazy. But the lady in white, she never lived here, so it's unlikely that she would be the ghost. But anyway, when I moved here, obviously I said the house was not livable, and so there was a lot of work that had to be done before we could start on the fun things. A lot of things that took a lot of time and money that you really couldn't see any effort. Obviously the roof was done, but there was, the plumbing was old. I think it was cast iron. We had to take all of that out. There were some old tiles that were in the bathroom upstairs and we just had to get rid of those because they were not salvageable. There was wall-to-wall carpeting almost throughout the entire house, except I believe the third floor, but in the library. Indian area, but all the rest of this was wall-to-wall carpeting that, with a leaking roof, you can imagine what that was going on. And one of the fun things was, as we were ripping up the carpeting, discovered in some places original flooring. Some of the floors had additional flooring on top of it that was rotted, and that we took out and then found original flooring underneath, particularly on the oldest house, the bedroom on the second floor. That was a serendipitous finding with that. And in fact, there are a couple other rooms. It's like, oh well, maybe we should have ripped up the floor and these, but it was thin, and they really couldn't be refinished. We're trying to refinish the floors, so we had to rip it up, and thought we were going to have to replace it, but then we were able to find the old floors. Roger Baugh, who was the previous owner, had done a lot of work outside the house. There had been a bay window right behind everybody there. He took that out and put the French doors back, which actually were more original to the house. I believe John B. Dennis in the 1920s actually put the bay window in, so he took that out. I think the roof was not leaking before he died, which is, I guess, why he did not do that. He did a lot of the landscaping. He did do the guest house, but did not do virtually anything inside this house when he owned it. He just owned it for a couple of years. But we had to, all the plumbing, we had to completely rewire the house. Fortunately, my mother and my stepfather, they were living in Arkansas at the time. They would come over frequently, and some of you who are junior league knew Raymond, my stepfather, and he's quite a character. But one of the great things is that he would come over and do a lot of demolition. He used to kind of do that with old houses anyway, or with houses, and hire people, and they'd do things and replace the plumbing, and he'd supervise all of that. He had a brother-in-law who was a licensed electrician, which was wonderful, because I basically had to work a while, save some money, spend it on the house, save some money, spend it on the house, which took a little bit of time, and all the behind-the-scenes stuff that had to be done. There was no air conditioning in here. It was all hot water radiator heat system with, again, cast iron radiators and everything else, and we took all that out because it's like, oh, I've got to have air conditioning and heat and air. So we put in actually it's a 4-zone heat and air system, which I've been here long enough. I'm now on my second one. I'm also on my second roof, so you know you've been here a while and you start repeating things. But we did a lot of that. We did redo the first major inside with the library, which you'll see, and then the den in the back, which I've kind of partitioned off because that's my messy room, so I'm beg your pardon for not seeing that one, but we finished that area. There's a little bathroom in there. We redid that, which again has also been redone since then. And my mother and stepfather would stay over here when they came over, and I was over in the guest house, and they'd work and do things. The library was, I called it my inspiration room. It was the first room that I said that we really got done. I already had a lot of leather-bound books that I wanted to put up, so I put those in there. And sometimes I'd come over and just close the door and look and say, someday this will be worth it, eventually. But we had a lot of little things that had to be done. Once we got things stabilized and the roof on and it was considered habitable, then what I was able to do was refinance, and now the house was worth something. So I was able to then get a mortgage that I had a chunk of money to finish the house. And at that point, I employed Prendergast Construction. I'm sure a lot of you know him too. And we had to replace part of some of the columns, redo several of them. The railing at the very top, the captain's walk or widow's walk, that had to be completely redone. I said we were pulling up flooring, redoing a lot of the old floors that we could. Some of the floors we had to put new flooring down. This room, the library, or not the library, the dining room. We were not able to do the flooring out here is probably original. And there are a lot of nail holes from all the carpeting and other floors that were there. And then upstairs, probably about 2/3 is original flooring. Third floor is completely original. In fact, that's the oldest original flooring, and it was in the best because there was never carpeting up on the third floor. And the third floor is just where they joined the two houses. When the two houses were joined about 1845, then they put the third floor in that joined area. So there's only the new house and the old house have just 2 floors, and then the third floor in that middle portion. There's also full basement under the new house, that's this one, and the combined area, there's crawl space under the old house, which also was interesting because it had settled over the years, as you can well imagine any old house is going to. And when we were redoing the kitchen, because it had to be completely renovated, and I put in what's called an Aga cooker, which is this big cast iron monstrosity, weighs about 1,000 pounds, and had to be reinforced. So we were getting down, and we were down to crawl space there because the flooring, the subflooring, and the floor joists were all rotted there. In the old house, that was the problem we had throughout that part of the house, an unexpected, not pleasure, that we ran into. But when we were doing that, they then leveled everything on that flooring. When you go up and tour on the second floor, the den on the old house, if you walk in there and it feels kind of like you're slanted, you are. I had considered making it sort of like a men's room with a billiard table or stuff like that, and it's like, there's no way, all the walls would go. But it's, if you don't think about it, you might not think a whole lot, but it's kind of like, oh, yeah, things are kind of list that way. But the underpinnings were all stable, but we had to, even the cabinets in the breakfast room had to be leveled and taken down and leveled, because they were, when we got the new floor and roof, the cabinets were like this from where they had been, so we had to do that. The kitchen was added about 1930s by John B. Dennis when the guest house was built, and you can actually, when you go outside, you can actually see that the brick matches in that area. And when they put the kitchen in, they closed off fireplace in the breakfast room right next to the kitchen. There's fireplace above and chimney above, but it was all plastered over or whatever they had used. And we knew that historically there had to be a fireplace there. And one day we finally, with the contractor, it's like, okay, let's just do it. And sledgehammer out, and sure enough, we uncovered a working or semi-working fireplace. So that was a pleasant finding at the house. But there was, say, a lot of stuff. The utility room, half bathroom between the yellow room and the breakfast room, I added, that was a butler's pantry when I first came here. Most of what we've done here, what I did here, was not changing. These rooms were all this big, they were all this open. The bathrooms that had been put in at the turn of the century, a lot of them are long and narrow, that was already here. The changes, one major change, but the utility room, the laundry was actually being done down in the basement. That was not acceptable. So I wanted a laundry room, and so I converted the butler's pantry, we converted it into a half bath and laundry room and enclosed that so that I would have that on the first floor. The only big change I made was actually on the second floor. And when you go up the stairs and head this way, right above here, right at the top of the stairs, there was a hallway there that went into a little bathroom, and that's the bathroom that had the mushrooms. And then there was another bedroom and a bedroom off this side as well, and 2 bedrooms and closet area. I closed that off because I wanted a master suite. The original master bedroom that the Stones and others had used was on the other side of the house, which has the bedroom, an adjoining bath, and then the den, the slanty den. But for some reason, I wanted this side of the house for my master bedroom bath. So we closed that off, enlarged the bathroom, because I wanted one modern bathroom with jacuzzi and all that kind of stuff. Try to keep some things historic, but not bathrooms. So I now have the bedroom, master bedroom, bathroom, and then there's a private sitting room, walk-in closet. And I will ask you on the tour, I have the door closed, please don't open that door. It's another messy room that I'm still working on for my walk-in closet. But that was the only major change. Everything else was pretty much, other than taking down a door, there was a door here and it's sort of got in the way, so we took that down. Otherwise, we actually did very little major changes there. An interesting thing with the dining room, and actually let me back up. One of the things that I found that has always been fascinating, and still I find every so often, is little treasures. Things that are different. For example, every fireplace mantle is different. Some of them are more elaborate than others, but no 2 of them are exactly the same. And some of those things I didn't really notice. Even around, it's pretty plain in this room, but there are others that have surrounds and woodworking, and it's almost different everywhere. And in the dining room, that has the most elaborate mantle and window surrounds of any room in the house. And the fireplace, Roger Ball had actually done some work and research on that and discovered that there were 12 coats of paint on the fireplace mantle. So we actually took the mantle down and took it, the contractor, I didn't do it, contractor took it and dipped it to try to strip it as much as possible, which helped tremendously. But that fireplace, it has lattice work, it has other scrolls and whatever. Couldn't get that off. So I actually had some sweat equity and discovered the joys of tools, little Dremel motor tools. And I would often come over and spend an hour or 2 in the evening cleaning off the paint that had accumulated within the lattice, because you lost a lot of the detail of the lattice work because of the globs of paint that were in there. So, and that was kind of a fun project for me to do. But as I said, we uncovered the fireplace in the other room. Excuse me, the kitchen and the master bedroom bath were designed by me and Bob Prendergast. We did that so that I could live here. One other big change, semi-big change as far as decorating, the dining room did not have, just like this room, does not have any central lighting fixtures. And it has the cove ceiling, that's the curbing at the top. Both rooms down here have that. The dining room, as the house was talking to me, I guess, it said, you need a chandelier. And so I installed the chandelier. We installed the chandelier here, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but the
medallion.
the medallion around it it's actually a reproduction of, I believe it's the Devereaux house in Jackson or somewhere. But it was hard finding things big enough for this house because you'll go to a store and it looks like it's huge. You bring it here and the ceilings are 11 feet on the first floor and 12 feet on the second floor. But the house said you need a chandelier in the dining room, so I put a chandelier in the dining room as well. Someone even asked me one time, I hadn't been here too long, and they said, well, how are you going to decorate this? What are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I said, I've got a few things that I know, and she kind of looked at me and patted me on the shoulder. She said, it's okay, the house will tell you what it needs. So, I guess it is haunted. I actually did not move into this house. I stayed in the guest house until 1997. I had, for some reason, I didn't want to come over here even to stay. We had the back bedroom. I wanted to wait until I could actually move in. So I stayed in the guest house all that time until we had the master bedroom, bath, and the kitchen, and then I could move in. And so I did in 97. And then, just not long afterwards, I was approached by Junior League. I'm glad they did. It was difficult at the time, and I know a lot of you were involved in that, and it was quite an experience. But they came in to do a decorator show house, which basically, for those of you who don't know what that is, they bring in different decorators and artisans, and they had one or several groups for basically each room and part of the house. They did landscaping, and one of the nice things was I did have a few things that I was you can't do this or you can't do that, and they were very nice at working with me there. Or some things that, for example, my mother loves the high Victorian, and even though it's not completely period to the house, I thought, well, I want one high Victorian bedroom, and it's the bedroom over here on the second floor. And so I said, I want a red Victorian bedroom. So let them have at it. And what they did was, but otherwise, a lot of it was just kind of done. I also said I did want a mural in the front foyer here. And there, if you have a chance to really look at that and read about it, it's fascinating. Bertina Dew did the mural, and she did an incredible amount of research on that. There is a little, it's a laminated thing that talks about the different scenes, and whenever you see someone with a face that you can recognize as a face, it's an actual person that's associated with the house with Kingsport. So there's a lot of history in it. It sort of starts with me here, and then it goes backwards in time up to where the Cherokees. So it was kind of backward in time, but it's wonderful, and they did a great job. And most of the stipulation with the Junior League was that anything that was permanently attached to the wall was mine. If I didn't like it, they would take it back to primer. So, for example, the faux finishes and the paint in these rooms, that was left. And then I had the option of buying a lot of the window drapes, some furniture from the show house people, pretty much at their cost. So that was one of the benefits to me. And it was great having other people come in. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it all, and I've been delighted with all of it, and I love it. And it was difficult having them sort of invade my house, and I had to move back out to the guest house, and then having how many thousands of feet tromping through. So it was because I'm very protective of the house too. So it was difficult, but it was very worthwhile, and I'm glad it happened. I'm glad they did approach me about it. So I've had to redo some things, the bathroom and roof. I also installed just 2 years ago the gazebo in the back, but in the base garden. That was another one of those things that the property had said, this is for a gazebo. And I look at it now and it looks like it's been there forever, and it belongs there. It fits perfectly. There had been a large boxwood there that we took out and put the gazebo in, and I was very excited about getting that. The other big project that I have to do, which I don't know when I'll get to that, is the porch, the balustrade around the porch, or banister, around the, whatever it's called, around the porch, to try to replace that it's a very large area, number one. I've got pieces of the old one, but it was wood, most of it was rotted, and it's just very, very expensive, particularly to try to do it in something like composite that won't have to paint quite as much. But that's another big project. I've also been about halfway done over the years of putting in storm windows because of trying to make it a little bit more energy efficient, which is pretty much impossible. They're just drafts, and because nothing's really level, plumb, square, anything like that. It's an old house, and that's the way it is. But we try to make it a little bit more efficient. I actually had to upgrade my heat and air system, and it is more energy efficient and working better. But anyway, those are the sort of the things that I've had to do and continue to do. Any house has upkeep and needs work and loving care, even newer houses, but some are a little bit more than others, and this one definitely requires a bit, but it deserves it, and deserves to be taken care of. I think that's it for the opening part. I'm going to talk a little bit. So we're going to tour. We decided it may be hard to try to tour everybody, so what I'm going to do is just some highlights, and then I'm going to be available if anybody has any specific questions about the tour. But rather than trying to get 30 people in one room, we'll do that. So, but before I sort of point out some things, are there any questions or about either the history or whatever?
I have a comment and a question.
Sure.
The comment is, I'm so happy to hear that you have a little den where it's messy and you can put your feet out, because as I was kind of walking through, I was kind of like, well, where does she go in the evening? She wants to put her feet up, so good for you.
Oh, yes.
The other thing is, did you document the renovation? Do you have pictures before and after and during?
Some. I've got a closet full of boxes. They're in this back yellow room. There's a book that I had started that does have documentation of, I believe, the kitchen, and the couple of the rooms downstairs, and some of it before, during, and after. There was a videotape, a VHS videotape, and I can't find that. I don't know where that is. But we did take a lot of pictures. I'm just not very good at getting them organized and done. That's one of those projects that, I need to do that, and hopefully the pictures are still available. So,
yeah, that would be very fun. That would be very fun to see.
Do you use the fireplaces?
Most of them, as far as, well, yes and no. I have gas logs. There's gas to the property anyway, and the heat and air system actually is gas, and my stove is gas. I have gas logs in the library, the room next to it, and the breakfast room. Those all have gas logs. The chimneys look pretty good. I'm reluctant to have too many fires in them, so we have not opened the flues on the other side. This is not opened, so it's just mainly the 3 fireplaces that I have that are open. Oh, one interesting thing, I forgot this. When you look at the outside of the house, I say there were 2 houses that were put together. There is evidence that this portion of the house, at least part of it, was kitchen. And one of the things, if you go to the outside, the corner here, right before where the one-story projection is, if you kind of look down, there are a lot of indentations in the brick. And apparently, they used to sharpen knives against brick. And you can see the indentations there. Also, in the back, on this side, there's a fireplace here and a fireplace in the library. But the chimney is this way. And if you look up, and you go above that, there's a window and fireplace, or the chimney right above it. So it makes a meander around, but it's one of those little details. The brochure that I took to Alaska, actually, that I had in Alaska. This is the original one, but yeah, but there's a little picture there. If you look, it's the back, but it's this one. There's a chimney right above a window. So there are a lot of funny little nooks and crannies upstairs where there used to be a stairway, probably next to the fireplace in the library that went up to the second floor. Before the houses were joined, they had to have access to there. But on the outside, it's kind of interesting to look at that. You can actually see the old roof lines as well, particularly on this side of the house. You can see on the outside. And I'll try to remember to go up to the third floor and open. There's access to the roof, and you can actually see the original 1820, what's left of it, roof, and on the other side, the 1818 roof. And I'll open that. If anybody really wants to walk up there, they're welcome to, but I did it once, so I can say I did it. But that's one way that they were able to date the house, was to see the original roof and look at the nails and that sort of thing. So most of the fireplaces are not working, but 3 of them are.
But beautifully.
Long story too, so, I'm sorry. But,
I said, but beautifully enjoyed.
oh, yes. Very much so.
Lenita, I have pictures taken from when I was in high school in this room, when the Pages lived here.
Yes, the Stones.
Stones,
Herbert Stone,
Balda,
yeah.
and, well, let's
Balda
see.
Pages.
Margie and Alice, my contemporaries, and we had a club, a high school club, and we had a dinner here. And I'll share those pictures with you.
I would love to see them.
A few decades ago.
Well, and you're keeping it beautiful. I have to say, living in Rotherwood Hills and passing, especially during the holidays, thank you for putting the candles in the windows and the wreaths. I mean,
I don't always get it done, but it does look nice when it's
everybody
done.
looks forward to seeing Rotherwood during the
Well,
holidays.
thank you.
Yes, and that's another
Thank
labor
you.
of love, just showing that you care. Yeah.
Well, see, it's worth caring for. It deserves to be cared for.
Thank you.
What about all these beautiful instruments?
Some things just happen. I started playing the piano when I was like 4 years old, and my mother was a music teacher, and so I've always loved it, played the piano. I always wanted 3 pieces of furniture: a grandfather clock, a roll-top desk, and a baby grand piano. And we got the baby grand piano. I've also played harpsichord, and the other one with the very elaborate painted, that is a reproduction of a French-style 2-manual harpsichord. Hand-painted, the soundboard as well as the casing was all hand-painted. I've always liked harpsichords, and it just had a chance. Actually, First Presbyterian has the sister harpsichord at the church here. It doesn't have the painting on it, but it's otherwise exactly the same as that. The 2, what we call square grand or box grands, just sort of fell in my lap. There was someone who was near here who had this instrument sitting in their warehouse, and they contacted me and said, "We have this piano that if you want it, and for steel," and I said, "Sure," and found someone who, and actually I think they were in Boone, who restored old pianos. So this one actually has been restored. This one dates to about 1880. And it's a Steinway that was built in the Steinway factory in New York. And it is playable for anyone who's a musician. Most of these older pianos and instruments were tuned a half step lower than modern instruments. So what we call A440 on a modern piano, you play A and it vibrates at 440. You have to play A sharp or B flat on this one to get that same note, because the whole thing is a half step lower. The harpsichord actually has a way to move the manual, so that you can adjust whether you're playing with the old instrument or the new instrument. The other one that's a box grand also is also a Steinway, and that one dates actually back to about 1850 something, and was in the original, was built in the original Steinway factory. That one my mother found in Little Rock. Someone had access to it, and she grabbed it up and brought it over and gave it to me. This one actually was also at Fisk University for a while before it went to somebody's warehouse, and I didn't plan to get, 3 pianos and a harpsichord, but and fortunately I had the room for them. Someday I hope to restore that one too, but haven't had a chance to get it restored.
What's the offset part there on the squirt grand? I don't know.
That's just the way they're made, because the strings go this way on those, it's that way. But here the strings go this way, so a lot of it probably has to do with the soundboard and the way it's made, but that's just the way they are. So.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt for just a moment. I want to thank Lenita for allowing us to come into her home. This is such a treasure for us to get to be here. Many of us have not been here for 20 years, and so it's a real pleasure to get to see it again. It's as beautiful as it was when the decorators were in. And thank you. Lenita is going to let us go through the house at our own pace. She's going to talk a little bit about each room of what she hasn't already covered.
I'll be a lot briefer.
But our theme this year is Treasures of Kingsport. This home is certainly one of the most bestest treasures that we have. And Lenita's a treasure for buying it and restoring it and keeping it maintained and allowing us to come and other groups. I know she has the ballet and the symphony and guest singers come and various people, but it's truly a cultural treasure of our town, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So kind of special. Okay, any other questions? Anything else?
Thank you so much.
You are most welcome.